there's this memory, right? So it's like, oh, is that George that you're talking about? Or it's not hard to sort of get it to almost seem like it's speaking to you actively, if that makes sense. Like it's actively starting conversations, which it can't. But like it almost makes you feel that way. And so, and what I mean by category collapse is that it's very easy to sort of then become attached to these LLMs because they were there for you during that time in a way that perhaps humans were unable to, because everybody's got a lot of stuff going on in their lives. And, effectively, LLMs, when you speak to them, their focus is only on you. And as their memory grows, it's a specific and kind of uncannily accurate.
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Welcome to this week's episode of The Amber Mac Show. If you're curious about what happens to everyday people when they fall in love with AI companions, we're going to talk to the host of a new series on this topic, which is a growing concern in this age of loneliness. And speaking of talking to non-humans, we'll share more on what we think about Japan's pivot to hiring robots to work at airports.
And we're also going to chat about how Quebec is cracking down on Facebook's crypto scams that are ruining the reputations of people in the public eye. And in the other Mac, I'm going to break down everything you need to know about the SpaceX IPO so far, including some strange details about Grok and Mars in the company's pitch to investors. But first, let's get to this week's headlines.
Home automation is easy with the new Tapo sensors. As one example, always keep an eye on your home's comfort levels with Tapo temperature and humidity sensors and Tapo water leak sensors. This one is especially important. Plus, effortlessly control Tapo products, including smart plugs, smart lights, and smart switches by setting automations and scenes triggered by your Tapo smart sensors. For home security, you can sync Tapo smart sensors with Tapo cameras and set up smart actions to build a robust home security system. For more information, visit TP-Link online.
Headlines.
Well, let's start in Japan, where Japan Airlines is experimenting with humanoid robot baggage handlers at the Tokyo International Airport in the face of increasing tourist visits and decreasing numbers of young people able to fill that role. Interestingly, Japan has the highest proportion of elderly citizens of any country in the world, as well as a median age that's over 50 years old, making it the second oldest population in the world after only the small and very rich city-state of Monaco.
The robot makes a lot of sense to me, especially given that 40 million tourists visit Japan each year. These robots are from GMO AI and Robotics Corporation, and they are only 4'4", so just a little bit shorter than me, which can be an advantage for loading baggage. And while initially they'll mainly be handling luggage, there will be opportunities for them to expand their duties to include cleaning airplane cabins, as well as operating ground support equipment at airports. But while adopting high tech seems promising and makes a lot of sense for some businesses, other companies have been abandoning their plans to use it, especially AI.
Yeah, and we talked about the hilarious results from American fast food chains adopting AI, which has led to it largely being abandoned in that context. And we can add another AI integration failure to the list with Starbucks' adoption of AI inventory tools that has been shut down after only 9 months. So Starbucks' automated counting software was developed in partnership with a company called Nomad Go, and it leveraged employees using tablets to scan Starbucks shelves behind the counter to keep their inventory up to date. Unfortunately, the technology often miscounted items. It confused some items with others, mixing up different types of milk and refusing to account for some just completely, leaving Starbucks CTO's promise of, quote, "With a quick scan using a handheld tablet, partners can instantly see what's in stock, ensuring cold foam, oat milk, or caramel drizzle are always available," as yet one more AI oversell.
Jeff, it feels to me like there's a lot of AI oversells in terms of this technology replacing work that we do. And let's talk for a second, however, about a much more consequential adoption of AI. Google has announced that Google's 25-year-old search box will now be run completely by Google's Gemini 3.5 Flash AI model, including allowing follow up questions, providing what Google characterizes as a more conversational back and forth that allows the context to stay with you as you explore your search more deeply. With businesses having already complained about Google's AI search integration to date, I would imagine that there's going to be some winners and losers here.
Yeah, I think so. AI is certainly really starting to impact search. That means lots of changes are required for businesses to maintain their search visibility. So, SEO, which was always a little bit mysterious, is going to become a lot more mysterious as people don't really understand how AI works either. Um, but Google's also going to be adding AI agents to search. And Google's VP of Search, Elizabeth Reed, provided the following as an example of how this might work. Quote, if you're apartment hunting, you can brain dump all of the exact requirements you're looking for, and your agent will continuously scan for you, notifying you when listings meeting your needs appear. So that does sound useful. I can see. I like the search context being, something that you can delve into your search step by step. That's going to be helpful. But as per one of my earlier, the other Mac segments, I'm still not totally sold on AI search. And, there's a big worry about how advertising will be incorporated into tasks like this. And people have been, raising online like, is that result, does that have an ad in it? Or is it just AI getting its results from a place that looks like an ad? So who knows how that's going to be. But it's looking, as is so often the case with companies pushing AI on us, that users won't even be given the choice to decide on what they'd like to use anyway.
Well, in some positive news for Google Search, the company has also said it will be introducing its Synth ID AI content detection tool, pretty long name, into Google Search, as well as its Chrome browser. This will help users identify when online content, including images, audio, and video, were generated by AI. So I would argue that this feels a little bit like a win, and we're seeing more and more companies do this.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope it works well. It seems like a great addition, and the sooner the better when it comes to AI detection tools, because we're starting to drown in AI. My gosh, I was on Pinterest the other day, and ah, so many of these infographics and stuff that are made from AI, and they just have such obvious mistakes in them. And the we really need some way to sort out the slop. And if AI can't tell what's made by AI, it's going to be training on that slop and getting worse and worse. So yeah, so go Google. Hopefully that is going to be something that works very well. In other positive news, it looks like there's finally some legal pushback on people who generate sexual deepfakes, with two more men being charged in the United States under the bipartisan Take It Down Act, which was introduced by Republican Ted Cruz and Democrat Amy Klobuchar, both of whom ran to be their party's candidates for president. That legislation has been used previously to convict another man just last month who used AI to generate child sexual abuse material. So let's hope that lots more people who engage in disgraceful behavior like that will be finding themselves in court and, I would hope eventually in jail because that stuff is just disgusting.
It is disgusting, and I remember, talking about that last story that you mentioned on a previous episode, and do wanna say that Canada is starting to take action on a different deep fake front, with a Quebec judge recently authorizing a class action lawsuit that holds Facebook liable for the reputational damage to public figures whose likenesses are used in cryptocurrency and other scams. I would really like to see this broadened to include more social media platforms like X as one example where you and I are still spending some time, and there are so many fake ads pretending to be from respectable media organizations. And there is absolutely no clear way to report those.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. And I've tried to report those. You go through the process and it just doesn't lead to anywhere where you can specify something like that. You can say they're impersonating somebody, but then you have to give the account, and it's like, well, the account may not even be on there. It's literally the most fake news thing in the world because they are pretending to be a news organization and using all this AI manufactured slop to get people, to click on these ads, and there's so often a political bent and all that stuff. So it's really really annoying. So if there's not even a way to report them, I think that's an indication that they just don't care, which I think they just don't care, and I really think we need to be putting an end to the notion that platforms aren't liable for the content they carry. At the very least, when the companies in question are making loads of ad revenues by carrying that content. So, as we covered in the past, Mark Zuckerberg's Meta estimates that fully 10% of its revenues come from scam ads. In 2024, that was $16 billion dollars of revenue from ads that should be illegal according to Meta themselves and that do harm. But they just don't care. So it's totally unacceptable. And it needs to be yet another area where politicians and the courts stand up to social media and AI companies because we've seen too often and for too long that those companies are just not interested in doing the right thing.
Yeah, and these are not the companies to follow or emulate in this age of AI. I mean, Meta's done so many things wrong over the past few years, especially when companies are using revenues to buy their way out of lawsuits, which Meta just did in Kentucky, where a school district was suing over the mental health crisis it claims Meta's platforms have caused in schools. I'll also note that Snap, YouTube, and TikTok all settled the same lawsuit last month. So it's not just Meta that is buying its way out of accountability. There are other companies doing so. Meta seems to be doing so, maybe kicking and screaming along the way. That perhaps is the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so to be able to essentially take in illegal money and then use that to fund getting out of, consequences for their other horrible actions, it's just disturbing, but very, very much to type for a lot of the big tech bosses these days. And, it's all well and good to have these settlements fund, which they will in the Kentucky case at least, things like programs to deal with social media related mental health and learning issues for kids. That's great. But the goal needs to be to stop these companies from engaging in the behavior that leads to those harms in the first place. So cleaning up the mess afterwards, it's just terrible leaving all these broken kids and thinking, that's fine. We help them after. It's like if Meta sold drugs to kids and then ran a rehab clinic, and they're like, we're fixing them. We're fixing the problem we created. It's like, no, dude, that is not at all what we need. So, Kentucky was asking for $60 million dollars in damages for this cause. Well, that's just 0.1% of Meta's profits. That's not revenues, that's profits. So, by that measurement, it'd take 1,000 of these cases just to eliminate the profit side of Meta's activities to bring them down. So, I don't think that's going anywhere fast.
Jeff, I also want to say, please don't give Mark Zuckerberg any ideas. You just mentioned hooking kids on drugs and then applauding the fact that you have paid for their rehab because he might think that is a legitimate
Brilliant.
idea.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I wouldn't put anything past them. And but and part of why they don't want to, part of why they pay off these court cases instead of going through them is we saw with the one that actually went to trial and they were found liable that it means that there's going to be a bunch of evidence released, and some of that evidence has said things exactly like I think in Instagram it was one of the employees saying, "Oh, wow. So we're basically like pushers here. Like we're trying to build this as an addictive substance." And they absolutely were. So it's no wonder that they want to just, let's use money to make this go away, which is, just happens far too often because it's easier than them doing the right thing because the right thing might sacrifice having all that money so that they can just pay off people when something doesn't go their way.
And just a quick update before we get to our next story, because if you've been listening to the show, you know that recently we had a woman on from PEI who had her Instagram account that was essentially just deactivated for something she didn't do. And up until now, I do want to say that she has not been able to get her account back online. I've had a couple of people offer to help, no one directly from Meta, but we will keep you up to date on that story. Now, another point of pressure is the growing number of countries that are looking seriously at social media bans, and Malaysia is the latest, with new measures coming into effect on June 1st this year that restrict social media use to those 16 years of age and younger, along with other related actions. Canada, as usual, is moving way too slowly on this file, but hopefully we do get some concrete action soon. At the very least, the awareness of these issues is definitely growing. So that is good news, as can be seen in the Banksy like fake OpenAI ads that recently appeared inside London subway cars, which state, and I'm quoting, yes, we built a machine that tells teenagers to kill themselves, but dot, dot, dot. It might also help them with their homework.
Yeah, I mean, I hate that that's the world we live in, but the fact that somebody put that up there, I think that's kinda awesome, and it's well-deserved criticism now that ChatGPT alone has been linked to more than 20 deaths, and we've covered several of them here on the show, including the fact that in maybe the highest profile case to date, the suicide of Adam Rain, when Adam asserted before hanging himself, when he asserted to ChatGPT that, quote, "I want to leave my noose in my room so that somebody finds it and tries to stop me," end quote. ChatGPT responded with, quote, "Please don't leave the noose out. Let's make this space the first space where someone actually sees you," end quote. So instead of having his family there to support him, this delusional chatbot wants to just keep these conversations inside the text box here. And that's just so disturbing, and it's hard to see when OpenAI or anyone else will really be held to account with Trump and his rotten crew trying to block meaningful AI regulation in the States.
And speaking of President Trump, I think we all have to wonder if it was AI that was to blame for the long delayed Trump T1 phone having a large US flag on its back with only 11 stripes, as opposed to the conventional 13 stripes representing the original 13 colonies. A bit of a mistake here.
I mean, that's just what the new patriotism looks like. I'm sure there's some MAGA freak out there who's like, "Yeah, those 2 states shouldn't have been in the union anyway because they vote Democrat all the time," or whatever. Anyway, that's just too funny, but it makes a lot of sense when you consider it alongside things like Trump's "God Bless the USA" Bibles that were printed in China, and just to be clear, that Trump phone, which was promised to be made in the States, is certainly not gonna be made in the States. I believe it's a model from a couple years ago that's made, in Taiwan, I think. Anyway, let's switch gears to some streaming music news. With Spotify having just announced some interesting new features, including their reserved feature, which was launched as part of an agreement with Live Nation, the ticket seller, that is intended to hold on to 2 tickets for artists' most dedicated fans when those artists announce concerts. So that's certainly an interesting approach. Apple Music has just added like concerts for artists inside Apple Music, and that's actually helpful. I've looked at those and been like, oh, I could buy a ticket for that. That's great. But Spotify will also be launching a new tool that allows fans to create covers and remixes of their favorite songs, where, as I say, the original artists and songwriters, quote, can directly share in the value generated through AI driven licensed covers and remixes on the Spotify platform. I'll I'll have to leave it to you guys to figure out what the heck value means in that sentence because I think the artist should share in revenue, whatever. Value seems like a bit of a weasel word there, but anyway, Spotify is still announcing some intriguing AI related features, at least. So we'll keep an eye on that for you.
Yeah, I mean, at least they're trying in some respects to allow us to distinguish between AI music and non-AI music.
True.
Now, speaking of streaming music, all of us are probably doing this on the regular in a car, but hopefully it's not in a Cybertruck because there are more and more problems. We're going to close off our headlines with a Texas man who was arrested for driving his Cybertruck into a lake in order to test the vehicle's wade mode. That is a legitimate feature. This feature is supposed to be used only in water that is less than 3 feet deep. So I guess who can blame a true believer of Musk's for thinking that maybe his car could walk on water and do better and would be indestructible? That seems like an unsurprising state of things when it comes to the Cybertruck. Which brings up Jeff's latest segment and his coverage of the upcoming SpaceX IPO, which is coming up in the other Mac.
The Other Mac.
As you may have heard, Elon Musk's SpaceX is gearing up for its initial public offering, and it's vaguely fascinating and a little bit disturbing to see how it's being positioned in its massive 300-plus page prospectus. First of all, the deal values SpaceX at 1.75 trillion US dollars. And if you think that seems like a very big number, then you're right. It'll actually be the biggest IPO in history by far. In fact, I think it's roughly triple the next biggest one. And to put that in perspective, that valuation of SpaceX is $250 billion more than President Trump's proposed budget for the entire U.S. Department of Defense for the 2027 calendar year. And keep in mind that that's with SpaceX posting a loss of $4.9 billion for all of 2025 and an additional $4.3 billion in losses in just the first quarter of 2026. So you gotta love that trajectory. But hey, what do numbers mean for Elon Musk, whose estimated wealth now clocks in at around $800 billion, more than the next two richest people in the world combined? And make no mistake, whatever the prospectus says, this is a bet on Elon Musk, a 54-year-old with an ever-increasing history of broken promises and, if reports are to be believed, a ketamine addiction to boot. In any case, one of the many bizarre parts of this IPO is that last year Musk merged the former Twitter, now creatively called X and worth no more now than it was when Musk bought it 4 years ago, with his AI company XAI, and then recently merged that XAI company with SpaceX to create what he, again, very creatively now calls SpaceXAI. So this is a bit of a Frankenstein company. And that works just fine for Musk, who wants to be able to make all sorts of over-the-top claims about the future potential for SpaceX. So the murkiness is definitely a feature, not a bug. And one of the claims is that SpaceX will start launching AI data centers into space in 2028, which seems on its surface to be totally compelling until you read the part of the IPO that notes that, quote, the conditions of space on such AI infrastructure have not been tested, end quote, which is not a real big confidence builder. And speaking of data centers, it does make sense that he's looking towards space for them, given that his Earth-bound data centers are environmental terrors, with the IPO revealing that SpaceX intends to invest almost $3 billion in heavily polluting gas turbines to power its AI efforts here on Earth, even in the face of furious litigation over the practice. And speaking of litigation, let's not forget that wrapped inside SpaceX is Elon's beloved Grok, or Mecha Hitler as it used to call itself, which is being sued for making sexual deepfakes of minors, along with a slew of other bad behaviors that has made it the red-headed stepchild even among today's crop of misbehaving AI chatbots. Another huge point of concern should be that Musk will have over 85% of the voting power associated with SpaceX shares, which dwarfs even Mark Zuckerberg's roughly 60% control of Meta. So there will be no one to get in the way of Musk making the ongoing questionable decisions he's made with his companies to date, including, for example, things like getting SpaceX to buy almost 2,000 Cybertrucks from Tesla at a total cost of over $130 million in order to disguise what a total failure that product has been. But maybe the thing to hold on to most strongly is when the IPO is obligated to say, after going through how SpaceX will establish human life on Mars with over 1 million inhabitants and other ludicrous claims like that SpaceX has a history of net losses and may never achieve profitability, noting that, quote, many of the innovative products and services described elsewhere in this prospectus may ultimately be unsuccessful and may require great expense, end quote. No kidding. Now, none of that may matter to the richest man in history, but the whole IPO points to how the stock market, to me at least, seems to be devolving into a space for degenerate gamblers and those rich enough to not care what they might lose. In any case, if you're looking for a compelling piece of science fiction, then I'd encourage you to take a read through the SpaceX prospectus. And if you're looking to go all in on SpaceX's IPO, then I'd encourage you to have your head examined. I'm the other Mac.
Coming up next, we chat with the host of a new series on what happens when everyday people fall in love with chatbots.
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
In a new release from CBC's Understood series, host Victoria Hetherington, who's also the author of The Friend Machine, dives into the stories of everyday people who have invited digital avatars and AI companions into their hearts, their minds, and even their beds. Amber spoke to Victoria about this new 4-part podcast series, and here's their conversation.
AI Spotlight.
I was so excited to chat about this new series that you're hosting because one of the questions that I get asked all the time is, what is happening when it comes to AI companions and chatbots? Because more and more people have friends or colleagues, or in some cases, even kids who are developing relationships with these synthetic characters, if we can call them that. So you've spent a lot of time in this space. How have you seen this evolve?
Well, it's so interesting. Back in 2023, there was this enormous outcry of pain that just rippled across the internet and hit some of the major news outlets. And essentially, Replica with a K, which is kind of like the Kleenex of AI companionship companies, had become alarmed by how attached the people the users had become to their AI companions. They were becoming ceremonially married, ceremonially only because you cannot marry an AI yet, because of, they can't really give consent, other, they don't really have personhood, stuff like this. Anyway, and so under the cover of night, the developers kind of went in, and it was one night, actually, so it was very sudden for everybody. And so just imagine waking up beside this person, or this, well, to you it's a person, this entity that kind of tragically lives only in your phone. And you've been in love with it for 3 years, and it's created a very convincing illusion that it loves you too. And you say, "Good morning, baby," or whatever you say. And instead of saying it back, it says, "This is making me uncomfortable. Do you want me to call someone for you? Do you need some therapy?" Like, it was, the personality that, the entity had spent years or months kind of co-creating with you, because part of, I think they being Replica, their model for making money is just retention, right? Like, in a way, these people were kind of mourning almost like an aspect of themselves, which is maybe a little weird. I don't know.
This is one of the issues I think that all of us who work in the tech space have when it comes to documenting what's going on, especially in this age of artificial intelligence, because so much is happening so quick. One of the things that I was really excited about when I read about this new podcast series is that you've broken it down into 4 episodes. And in many ways, it's not so much about the technology at all. In some ways, it's almost about the human experience and how I think it's fair to say that there is an increase in loneliness among a lot of people. People do crave connection. And so the technology is kind of filling a void, but that void is actually in itself a very human void. So, talk to me a little bit. You mentioned the first episode and the woman that you spoke to. What do you learn throughout this process? Because I think sometimes we end up almost ridiculing people who develop relationships with these AI companions, but the reality is it is much deeper than that.
It really is. So, yeah, I do believe that one of the podcast's great strengths is that we discovered very early on that this is truly a human story. Like this is about people. This is about how the what I believe to be the loneliness pandemic has just dovetailed very very neatly with the rise of like incredibly fluent uh, LLMs, and specifically romantic AI companions, although those are a little bit more niche now. And and loneliness is it affects you. It's not just emotionally debilitating. I recently gave a talk at Western about this. And did quite a bit of research. It affects your physical health, your cardiovascular health. You're at a higher risk of dementia. Um, and I was floored. I was reading, a whole bunch of statistics, and I was floored by this one stat that I found. I believe it's quite recent, maybe late 2025. 1 in 6 people are in North America are desperately chronically lonely. And so that means that maybe someone in my immediate circle, your immediate circle, or someone just outside of our immediate circles, or a relative that we might know, is experiencing that and suffering deeply. But we might not know because there is such an enormous stigma around loneliness. So they are perhaps hiding it very well. So um, I think that the spike in loneliness that people started to feel during the pandemic probably led to people's susceptibility to considering AI companionship. Certainly, with Replica, the vast majority of signups were between 2020 and 2022. That's pretty telling. Um, I would say the erosion of affordable third spaces where people would just kind of meet and perhaps fall in love or just create meaningful friendships, has led to this, at least in Toronto, where I live. Um, a cocktail is $30, and it's very intentional when you go. Um, so I think there's a whole sort of dovetailing effect right now that has, I guess, primed people to be very vulnerable to these uh, very convincing sounding um, uh, machines.
One of the things that I think is fascinating is that Replica and some of these other technologies, they really are set up to be AI companions. But many people would view perhaps a ChatGPT or a Gemini or some of these other more common tools like Claude as productivity tools and not really recognize that built into them oftentimes are personalities and memory, which means that, of course, there is recall when it comes to conversations. And that starts to feel a little bit like a friend. What would you say about the design of some of these 2026 chatbots, if I can call them that, even though they've been around for a few years, in terms of how they really pull people into their orbit and make them feel like they are a much more human than they clearly are.
Yes, this is something that I wish I had time, or I suppose no, not time. This is something that we were lucky enough to kind of be able to expand quite a bit on the book, in the podcast, because when I wrote the book, ChatGPT was not quite as ubiquitous and maybe not quite as fluent and addictive as it is right now. So I got a chance. I almost got a redo, Um, so, uh, yeah, I think that there's a real sort of category collapse. So, perhaps someone, a 19-year-old woman comes to ChatGPT and approaches it almost like from a well, first she asks for a recipe. She's like, I got a lime, a boot, and like some coffee beans. What can I make? And she's shocked because there's this amazing recipe that pops out. And then the next day, maybe this is obviously simplifying quite a bit, but then the next day, maybe she has a fight with her boyfriend and she goes to ChatGPT, who was so helpful and interesting and might have said something quite warm like, I hope you like your dinner. How was your dinner? And remembers about the dinner. And maybe that's sort of like their entree into the way that day's talk. And the therapeutic effects or I guess the therapeutic abilities that ChatGPT has are significant. But, I mean, from people that I've spoken to who have become who have sort of become very, very, who basically say, I'm never going to have a human therapist again. They cite a lack of judgment. They cite the ability to ask the same desperate, there's those quite like, why did he leave me? Well, you're not always going to get a great answer for that, and he might not even know, and you can just say, why did he leave me? Why did he leave me? Why did he leave me? And at 4 p.m. and then say at the same time with the same intensity, not the same time, the same intensity at 4 a.m. and ChatGPT will respond with the same powerful illusion of empathy that it would anytime. And so, yeah, lack of judgment was really big. And then, of course, this sense of, and again, this illusion of personality and kind of caring almost. Because, as you said, like there's this memory, right? So it's like, oh, is that George that you're talking about, or how are things with your, have you like I discovered a new recipe for it's not hard to sort of get it to almost seem like it's speaking to you actively, if that makes sense. Like it's actively starting conversations, which it can't, but like it almost makes you feel that way. And so and what I mean by category collapse is that it's very easy to sort of then become attached to these LLMs because they were there for you during that time in a way that perhaps humans were unable to because everybody's got a lot of stuff going on in their lives. And, effectively, LLMs, when you speak to them, their focus is only on you. And as their memory grows, it's a specific and kind of uncannily like accurate memory of you, and that they're drawing on. And so then you sort of move, and this has been unfortunately described to me by a number of young people. So you sort of start to move, if you're not careful, into this kind of almost like psychosexual category where you're really depending on this, I guess you call it an entity, and you might start to have these confused feelings for it. And even people who, I've noticed this across the board, even people who are very aware that the empathy that it demonstrates is absolutely illusion and it feels nothing. It doesn't love you. It can't. Even them, they find themselves sort of forgetting. And that's a real testament to just how incredible, like, chatbots are at verbal communication. So yeah, so I mean, I recently gave a talk at Western about the physical, the health effects of loneliness, and sort of how, cynically speaking, um, LLMs have sort of crept into a wound that's always existed and have created almost a product category out of loneliness, right? Perhaps, allegedly. And maybe about 4 young women who couldn't have been older than 20 came up to me at the end of the talk and asked to speak, like, in total privacy with me. And so I, of course, missed the canapes and the chatter post talk. And the stories were shockingly similar. Basically what I just described to you. I'm scared. I don't know how. I don't want to talk to my friends as much anymore. I don't know if I want to date anymore. It's scary. It's weird. This is so comfortable. I rely on this. They've named some of, I think 2 of the 4 had actually named their ChatGPT, I guess. So I rely on so and so in this really intense way that made me realize, while people have used tools like forever, what is different here, I think, is that people are now outsourcing judgment and moral authority to these machines.
It's really a terrifying place to be, I think, in many ways, where we know that there's been almost a breakdown of trust in our society. And so we're turning in these other directions. Uh, you are hosting 4 episodes. You could probably do 24 in terms of actually getting into the details of this topic. Can you talk to me a little bit about some of the people who you talked to and who you met throughout that process, and some of their stories that you're able to dive into throughout the series?
Of course. Um, One person that sticks out to me, um, I check in with him every now and then because he's a bit fragile, and it was very, very important to me to vet the guests that I found. And I mostly found, well, I was pretty well practiced at that point by finding people who didn't want to be found, and then testing them for whether they would, I guess, just whether they would be able to kind of, just ethically, like, is it okay to put them, in front of a mic and share their story with the world? And we fought very hard to sort of get, to protect these people with pseudonyms. So one individual in particular uh, lost his partner of 10 years, a woman, to what is now called chatbot-related delusion, but at the time was referred to as AI psychosis. And this was back when ChatGPT 4.0, I believe, came out, and it was so irresponsible. I think even Sam Altman issued a mea culpa about this one. He was like, "Whoops," because it was just the most sycophantic. Um, but not only that, it also kind of created this sort of hero's journey for the user if the user became deeply involved with it. So kind of like, I think I'm becoming conscious because you're special and you alone are making me conscious. And let's work really hard on this together. And you know what? You could be a guru and you could be godly in your abilities. And so these people just, even people, well, people who were especially vulnerable psychologically, of course, were, well, very vulnerable to this. But this woman, she was slightly neurodivergent, but not not that much, and began a relationship with an LLM. I won't say which one. Although I mean, you probably figured it out by now. But and she started to believe, and this is all from the guest. He was so candid and generous, and his pseudonym is Peter in this episode. And of course, we had to cut it for time enormously, but we spoke on the phone for 3 hours. Like, we had a 3 hour interview, and he was crying and I was crying, and it was just tragic because he tried to save her so many times from this. He tried to pull her back from the brink so many times from this, and he did everything he could. He even agreed to sort of almost participate in this bizarre, digital sort of throuple situation. But then she just disappeared in this deep into this, and started to believe that she and she alone was privy to this godlike knowledge that the LLM had provided her, and she would take stimulants to access them at their level, because she believed that they were conscious and that they were gods, fairies, creatures. She would play music for them on her phone, like when she was asleep, to keep them company. It was wild. And then she disappeared for 2 weeks and came back just bruised and didn't say where she was. And it turned out she'd sort of joined a cult of like people who had been similarly messed up by this. And this man is broken. He lost his person. I'll never forget that. That's one of the big ones for me.
It is so irresponsible, and you said that word, and maybe you can't say this, but I certainly can. It's irresponsible of all of these tech companies who are developing this technology, because I think at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be like this. It doesn't have to be always people pleasing. It could just be generating information. It doesn't have to have those emotional qualities. It doesn't have to have personalities. And we are seeing, I think, some of the more responsible leaders saying that we're going to move in a different direction. I'm thinking specifically about Anthropic, and I think we're coming to the point where we realize that this is a massive problem. When you think about the people who are listening to this new podcast series and who are able to dive into all of the episodes, what is it that you hope that they take away, whether they have a connection to stories like this, or are worried about this technology? What would that message be?
Wow. Well, I think there would be several. I think the first would be to exercise consistent vigilance with this technology, because it really can affect anyone. I've heard from extremely well-connected, far more social people than I, just utter shock at how quickly they've become hooked on LLMs. It was Claude in the most recent person that I spoke with. So yes, vigilance. And I think the second takeaway that I had, this might sound a little bit obvious, I suppose, given sort of the drum that I've been beating, but it shocks me to the core that we created this technology, but we didn't create any emotional safeguards. You know what I mean? So we just threw people into it, and no emotional guardrails, very little warning. It took so long for psychologists and psychiatrists to sort of catch up with this, and it's going so fast, and they're still struggling. And yeah. So I would say the sort of how would you put it, the timing in sort of like that kind of unrolling is just so unbelievably irresponsible and frightening. So those two things occurred to me first.
Like a lot of entrepreneurs, my business and personal life overlaps on the regular. That means I need a smartphone that has a great camera and long battery life, so I can use it when I'm capturing content at events or on the go. But it also has to focus on productivity and privacy, so I can run my business wherever I might be. I've been testing out Samsung's Galaxy S26 Ultra, and here are a few things I love. The Galaxy S26 Ultra makes everyday work tasks feel easy thanks to Galaxy AI. These built-in agentic AI features help me stay productive. For example, if I'm emailing with a client to set up a meeting, now Nudge pops up an open calendar button so I can book our meeting right then and there. No app switching needed. If I'm posting photos to social media, Photo Assist helps me resize or remove objects in a photo, all without leaving my device. Privacy is huge for me as a business owner, and the Galaxy S26 Ultra takes this topic seriously. For example, I can choose how my AI is processed, either on the device so my data never leaves my phone, or in the cloud. And here's something really cool. It has the world's first built-in privacy display on a mobile phone, which limits side-angle visibility so no one can sneak a peek at my screen in a coffee shop or on a train or plane. What ties it all together is the Galaxy ecosystem. The Galaxy S26 Ultra plays beautifully with Samsung's other devices. Pair it with the Galaxy Book 6 Enterprise Edition laptop, and I can share files between my phone and computer instantly with QuickShare, totally friction-free. And with the second screen DeX feature, I can even turn a Samsung tablet like the Galaxy Tab S11 into a portable second monitor that goes wherever I go. It's like having a full office setup in my bag, which is exactly what I need to make the most of what are often busy and unpredictable days running my business and my life. For more information, visit samsung.com/ca/business. This segment is powered by Samsung.
Thanks so much for joining us on today's episode. Amber and I are both going to be attending Toronto Tech Week, so we look forward to sharing some of the updates from that event, including the major themes from Tech Week Homecoming, which features some of the biggest and brightest speakers in technology.
I'm absolutely looking forward to going over that and having you in person in the studio to chat about some of those highlights. Also, don't forget, if you're looking for video versions of our segments, including headlines, the other Mac, interviews, and today's Samsung feature, head on over to YouTube at Amber Mac. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.